My name is Michael Molondo. I'm going to present on the subject of community-based care and support for the degree first year. And my presentation will cover the assignments that has been scheduled or prepared for the group that's doing the community-based care and support. There are 4 assignments for which you have to complete. So this presentation will only be a guide for you to prepare yourself for your assignment, and then also to give you some insight on what you can focus on and what you need to prepare on it. And then also it will also help you then also that when you are going to do your assignment, what you need to look at. And as I say, there are 4 assignments, so I will go through each assignment and then explaining in detail. And as I say, the purpose of this presentation is not to give you any answer, but just to give you a guide what you will need to prepare yourself. The first assignment is, I will also read it, it's going to be 25 marks, and I'm going to look at issues of caring for someone who is suffering with a long-term or life-limiting illness. And this illness is a very challenging experience. So what the assignment requires from you, the first assignment is to provide practical advice in support of overburdened caregivers. And then, of course, if you give this practical support and advice to caregivers that are looking for people that are suffering or that are having illnesses, chronic illnesses, then you have to give, of course, practical examples and also look at best practices. The second assignment is it requires you to critically look at the essential elements of community home-based care and support, and then to discuss in the light of the challenges that home-based care organizations are experiencing in Namibia. You will look at all of these challenges that home-based care organizations are experiencing in Namibia, and then also to come up and with practical examples, what kind of challenges, and then also you have to demonstrate, you have to explore your answer. So it's very important for you that even if it asks you to demonstrate, it means that you have to thoroughly and in detail discuss what are the list of these challenges, and not just giving the list, but as you list those challenges, for each list of the challenge, then you have to explain in detail. So the second or the third assignment for this course is to look at the comprehensive needs of people living with HIV/AIDS, and how important or imperative it is for them to live healthy lifestyle and live positively. And if they live positively, despite their HIV status, they can live a longer life. Now, what this assignment requires from you is then to discuss the statement in detail, and then critically look at people living with HIV/AIDS and their needs. And then, of course, you have to elaborate. You have to explain in detail for each niche that people are having, people living with HIV/AIDS. And of course, as you are going to look through this, you also need to elaborate for those that are on ART or antiretroviral treatment, and how important it is that even those people that are living with HIV/AIDS, they do have specific needs. And this is what the assignment will look at, that you have to discuss in detail, explaining the needs of people living with HIV/AIDS. And then, of course, the fourth assignment and the last assignment will then be a requirement where you will be required then that you are appointed as an advisor to a community-based organization. And then you are then required to restructure the whole program of this community-based organization, and then you're going to focus on community-based care. So the assignment requires from you to discuss what steps you are going to take to explain or to restructure this program, and then also looking at in your restructuring of this program to intervene in this in a specific community, you need to have a holistic approach, and looking also at the quality of this program that you are going to implement. And of course you can give reference, for example, to declaration like the Gaborone Declaration. You can also make reference to the Abuja Declaration. You can also make reference to the Maseru Declaration, all the commitments, Universal Access Commission, the Brazzaville commitments. So you are required to make reference. So what it actually means is you need to be well versed with all the declarations that has been made since 1996 with regard to community, up to date with regard to community-based organization. And so you can use these different declarations and commitments as a stepping stone for you to then implement or to restructure this program, which is very, very much more important in all ways. So we are going to focus now on the first assignment. And the first assignment is looking at the burdens of caregivers. Now, as you know, and as we discuss, and I will also recommend you that you have to look at your study guide, and then also look at what the study guide is saying with regard to caregivers and home-based care. Now, caregivers, it's very important to first understand that in your assignment, when you are going to do your assignment, you first need to explain what is a caregiver. You have to look at the duties of a caregiver. You have to look is what are the terms of reference of a caregiver in a household, a caregiver in a family, and what is then expected from a caregiver. So it's very important to look into that. Then after you have explained in your assignment the caregiver and you give references, of course you need to use sources. Say WHO defined home-based caregiver as this and this. And so that's what you have to first look at in your assignment. You have to explain, you have to elaborate about caregivers. After you elaborate on caregivers, what their duties is and what is expected to them, then the second thing what you have to look at is you have to look at the challenges of caregivers. What challenges are they experiencing? What problems are they experiencing? And it's very important that as you're going to discuss those challenges and those problems of caregivers, whether it's within a community or within a family, then thirdly, you are going to look at what are the different symptoms they're experiencing, especially when it comes to caregiving, and different signs and symptoms. And especially when you are a home-based caregiver yourself, put yourself in their shoes. What will be some of their symptoms especially when they are burnt out and they are stressed? So there is a list of symptoms that you can look at. So this is just a guide. As I say, it's not the ultimate answer. You have to go and research and come up with your own list. And I will also at this juncture also encourage you that as you're going to give each symptoms, you have to explain how does the symptom comes about. So you don't just give me a list of symptoms. Explain each symptoms as part of a challenge that caregivers can experience, which is very important. So I will go quickly through the list of the symptoms of stress that home-based caregivers can experience who are overburdened, especially when they are overworked. It is symptoms like anxiety, depression, and then also irritability, where they become very irritated, especially when they're under a lot of stress and there is so much expected from them. And then also there's a feeling tiredness, where they feel so tired and exhausted because of what is expected to them. And then because of this difficulty and exhaustiveness, they have experienced a difficulty to sleep. And this is where they can have sleeplessness an experience which can actually at the end have an effect on their body. So signs of overacting, the trouble to concentrate during the day, having feelings of resentfulness, and drinking, smoking, and the list goes on. So it's very important. So there are also other signs that you can also explain in your assignment. As I say, this is just a guideline where you can also look at burnout. Because there is a difference between being stressful and burnout. Burnout means that you have overstressed yourself. You are so tired, you have overworked yourself, and you have actually reached the limit of your capacity. And this is where your body becomes very accessible for flu, cold. As I talked about earlier, sleeplessness, you have issues with caring about yourself, you neglecting yourself, you don't look after yourself, you don't know what it means to reach. You become very impatient, irritable, and so the list just goes on. So this is what is expected from you. So in this assignment, you have to explain the challenges that home-based caregivers are experiencing. And as I say, this is just a guideline, but at the end, you have to explain then in detail what these challenges are. So we are going to go now to the second assignment, and as I say, the second assignment, to repeat again, is you're going to look very critically at the elements of community home-based care. And you are also then to discuss the challenges that this home-based care, community home-based care organization are experiencing. And it's very important that as you will experience, you're going to list each challenge. For each challenge that you're going to list, you have to explain in detail. So you have to explain, name the challenge, and you have to explain. So this list of challenges that I'm going to give you is just a guideline. You can also use other challenges in your own town or in the organization that's close to you that you know about. And it's very important that when you are going to name the name of an organization, at least it's very important that you have to cite the source. You have to give some references from where the organization is, who the organization is, what kind of work do they do, in which area or town or region are they situated, what capacity are they having, for how long are they. So just give a background of the organization itself, who the organization it is. And after you have given a background, then you can also discuss what they are doing and so on. So then you discuss the challenges. So there is a list of challenges that I'm going to share with you. The issue of gender it's very important where you have an organization, and as we know by historical experience that most of the caregivers are women who do take care of their families, and this is where you have to explain the issue of gender. Why are more women prone to be caregivers than men? Why men are not also involved in home-based care? So these are things that you have to discuss. And is it a sign of inequality? Is it a sign of ignorance? So it's very important to discuss the dimension of gender. And of course, you have to give practical examples. The other thing is you have to look at the physical impact of the organization itself, where the organization is situated, the geographic of the organization, where the organization is located, and what impact does the environment does to the organization. Are they working in a poor environment, and because of that poor environment, do they have a lack of funding, of resources? So this is something that you have to look into your assignment. The third one is you have to look at the emotional and psychological impact. You have this organization, and what makes this organization is the employees that are the home-based caregivers. You have to explain in detail how does the burden or the overburdenedness of this home-based caregiver. How are they affected emotionally? How do they cope emotionally? Psychologically, that if they are going to be affected, what defense mechanism do they have? What support system is there for this home-based caregiver? So you have to explain in your assignment with practical examples, and you have to explain in detail. The other issue is poverty, as I've explained also the physical impact. Poverty plays a very important role where most of the clients are poor people. They are working in a poor community. What challenge does that have for the organization, especially for home-based care organizations that are having challenge or very limited funding and resources to implement or to mobilize the home-based caregivers within the community. The very other issue, which is very important, is recognition. Many of our organizations that are doing marvelous job, and many of these caregivers are volunteers. They are not getting paid. They are volunteering themselves. They are sacrificing themselves without any remuneration or any reward. But because of that, of their status, that the fact that they are unknown, many of these caregivers are not recognized, and there are so many organizations out there that are working from the local community, grassroots community, and they are doing a marvelous, a very good job. So recognition, it is a challenge by itself, and this is where you can also discuss it in your assignment. So as I say, the other risk that caregivers can also experience, issues of transport, it's very important. So it's important that when you're going to look at assignment 2, you have to discuss these challenges of this organization, and as I've also said. So we are going to go now to the third assignment. The third assignment is looking at the comprehensive needs of people living with HIV/AIDS. And as I've said, looking into your, make reference to your guideline, to the books, to your study manual, to understand what it means to live positively with HIV/AIDS. People that are HIV positive, you can have a positive outlook. So this is where you can look at. You can first start is define what is people living with HIV. What does it mean to be HIV positive? What it means to live positively with a positive outlook. So you first give that background. You explain in detail. You explain exactly what it means. And in your assignment, as you are going to explain people living with HIV/AIDS and how what impact it has and how important it is for them to live a healthy lifestyle, then secondly, then you're going to look at the needs of these people, because they've got very special needs, and I'm going to go through that list. And there are different factors that can actually influence people living with HIV/AIDS, and these factors can have an effect on the needs of people living with HIV. So there are 4 areas that I'm going to look at, which is only a guide for you, of course. So you might come with a longer list that might explain more what are these basic needs. And thirdly, which is very important, is when you have this list, then you must discuss the negative and the positive impact of these needs, and what happened in a case where these basic needs are not met. What negative impact does it have on people living with HIV/AIDS? And then, of course, then you will look at the positive impact. When these needs are being met, what impact, positive impact, does it have on people living with HIV/AIDS? So it's very important for you to understand, and also in the back with the notion that most of these people living with HIV are on ARTs, on ARVs, and which means being on ARTs or on ARVs means it's a lifelong commitment. It's a daily commitment. It's something that you have to commit on for the rest of your life. So it's very important for you to look. Now, the different areas, 4 areas that I'm going to look at, or 3 areas that I'm going to look at, which is only a guide for you, is first the mental factor. So it's very important that people living with HIV/AIDS, they are having a mental need. They need to know and to understand and to think positively, to have a positive mind, which means although they are in a status where their health is being threatened, despite of that health threat, they still have a positive mindset. So this is something that you can discuss, and of course with example. The second one is you have to look at the emotional needs of these people. You have to look at how the sense of belonging, the need of being accepted, despite of their status, and then also when they are being accepted by the community without any stigma or discrimination, what impact does it have on their psychology? Then you're going to look at the psychological needs of these people, and you're going to discuss in detail, and when you're going to discuss it, give practical examples. And of course, they also have physical need, for an example. So they are also human, and they have needs like any other human. Just because they are HIV positive does not mean that they also have needs. They have needs of living positive. They have needs to exercise. They have needs to procreation. So the list goes on. And of course, biologically, it's a very important thing. Is many of these people, they have a desire to live longer. They have a desire, and they feel that they are not disabled. Many of them that are on ARVs are still healthy and very strong, and they feel that they can do any other work like what anyone is doing. So it's very important that in your assignment that you're going to look at these areas. And of course, you might expand, you might explain, you might have a longer list, but what's very important, you have to give practical example. You can also do the comparison, looking at the positive side, the negative side, the advantage, the disadvantage. So you can really explore, and it's very important when you look at assignment 3. So we're going to go now to the last assignment, which is assignment 4. And assignment 4 is it's looking at you as a program officer, and you are going to restructure or draft a program which is going to be implemented in a community. So what are you going to look at? What are you going to focus at? And it's very important for you that when you look at this programs, and when you're going to look at this, whether they are already existing or whether you've been requested to redraft them or to restructure, and of course, which is very important, that all programs has to address the needs of the basic needs of the community itself. And of course, you're going to focus on home-based care. Now, as I say, your starting point is you're going to look at the different declarations, and I've just put the Gaborone Declaration as one of them. There are so many declarations that you can use. You can use the Abuja Declaration, the Paris Declaration that's looking at realigning of funding, Abuja, which is all the way back to the 1996. Up to the current, where we are actually looking at the triple 90s, 90, that we want to reduce. We want to reach 90% of people. We want to reduce also the new infection by 90%. We want to see 90% of people on ARV, and the list goes on. So there are so many innovations or declaration or commitments that has been made, and so you can look at the current commitments. So I will encourage you that you visit the website of UNAIDS, the United Nations Joint Program on HIV/AIDS. You can also visit or look at the website of World Health Organization and look what they are doing, and then also if you Google, you can type in HIV declarations, commitments. You can look at universal access. finances, and the list goes on. You can also look at the sustainable development the goals, the SDGs, where you look at goal number 3, looking at the health. So there are so many things. So that's where you first look at the declaration, you start with that, and then you use a scenario. You give the name of a town, a name of a region, and you say you're going to work in a specific town, and this is how you're going to start off, and it's very important. So the second thing that you have to look at this assignment is you have to look, for an example, at individuals, how you're going to care for them. You're going to look at the environment. You're going to look at the issues of family. How does family support someone that's bedridden? You're going to look at the issues of the social welfare system. You're going to look at the needs of this person, whether it's spiritual, biological needs. How you're going to address this need. You're going to look at issues of psychosocial needs as you're going to draft this program, of course. So these are just, as I say, a guideline. So your program can have so many things. And then, of course, it's the program itself, the restructuring of the program. So this is something that you can look at. And as I said, this is just a guideline for you. You can decide on what you want to do and on the way forward. But at the end, it's very important that you follow this and that you will listen to what I've just explained to you. And I wish you all the best for your assignment. And as I say, make reference to your study guide, and of course also to this presentation of mine. I thank you.